want to turn your attention to the other side of the border here, boys. Here's my first statement about the Green Bay Packers. After all was said and done, it was the Packers who turned out to be the frauds, not the Minnesota Vikings. 13 wins, but they play close games, and we beat them, whatever. It's like, okay, but the Vikings put one on you at the beginning of the year, so eye for an eye. All these Packer fans, the Vikings are frauds. Well, you guys were like a 12-win preseason favorite to win the division, coming off 3 consecutive 13-win seasons and a Hall of Fame quarterback. I get that you lost Devontae Adams, but that team is still loaded with talent, and it has one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And you wind up getting beat twice by the Lions and finishing under 500 to finish 3rd in the division and miss the playoffs. I think we know who the frauds are. Nice little run at the end of the season, but I am so happy to see sad Packer fan tears dropping all over the state of Wisconsin and Minnesota. It was the Packers that turned out to be frauds, gentlemen.
It was very Ticey era Vikings like too, to get off to like have a bad stretch and then be like rushed to the finish. 2005 Vikings, when Culpepper got hurt, that team was off the rails, doing terrible. Brad Johnson steps in and they make a playoff run. Yeah. They fall short. Same exact thing. I got a text from a friend of mine who's a Packer fan last night who had a good point though. He said, when you got guys shoving the athletic trainers from the opposing team, you've got some discipline problems. Like that's coaching too. Like for LaFleur after the fact to be pointing to his head, think about what you're doing. Okay, dude, that's on you as well. Like if you have a guy that's that out of control, and who's now been ejected from a second game for doing something just incredibly stupid. Yeah. Like the first time, that needs to be fixed.
He's like crying in the tunnel on the way back, just like throwing a tantrum.
Well, dude, I just have the feeling that the Packers are in for a very interesting period here now as their QB goes Favre and vacillates about his future. And, Matt LaFleur, I think, is a good X's and O's guy. Like, I do think he knows the McVay strategies. I think he's a smart guy probably. But I don't know that he's O'Connell as far as dynamic goes. I just wonder if the Packers are in for not just a potential quarterback change in the next couple of years, but just an overall shift of things. I feel like that franchise, which for years and years, to their credit, was really well run, has hit more hiccups behind the scenes as well. I don't want to say it's going to derail them for sure, but I watch things like that and say, that's not the Packers teams I covered as far as the franchise goes. And they just seem to have a lot more of internal strife that's been growing.
And I'm not sure the fans have a full grasp on reality here. And let's give the audience. We did the full Packer vent line over on Purple Daily today, so you can check that out, the Monday episode of Purple Daily. But if you're wondering what the tone is among Packer fans here from 620 WTMJ in Milwaukee.
I just want him gone. I texted to a buddy, here we go. We're going to see Favre a la 2007. Watch the $50 million man. Watch the magic unfold. Bing! Throws the ridiculous interception. And I'm like, thank you. Please, please let that be the last of it. I've loved the man. He got us a title. A lot of great years of football. I'm just ready to move on. And Joe Barry could go away too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just ready to be done with the second Hall of Fame quarterback in a row that we've had over the course of 30 years. Just bring on purgatory. Okay, Packer fans.
How do you get to a point too where you, 4 years in? 3 or 4 years in, have no idea what Jordan Love can or can't do?
This is year 3, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, with, you have no clue. You draft this guy in the first round. You have, Jordan Love is not the transition plan now. He could be a bust. He could be a complete failure. You have no clue. That's just a lot of very questionable decisions. I understand you weren't going to bench Aaron. All of that being said, I guess my question is this. Why did you draft Jordan Love then? And why haven't you found a way to have an idea? I don't think they have any idea if this kid can play or not. And he's literally going to get to the end of a rookie contract.
Yeah, and if let's say they decide we're going to find out next year, we're gonna trade. I think if they were to do like a post June 1st designation, a trade of Rodgers. I mean, if he retires, I don't know how the cap situation works that way, but if they were to say mutually, okay, let's just move on here. We'll trade you to one of the 5 quarterback needy teams, Vegas or whatever, right? Cowherd threw out Tennessee last week as an option. I think if they do a post June 1st designation, the cap situation is not as hellish for them. But let's say Jordan Love explodes in year 4. Okay, well now he's up for a contract after his rookie contract ends after year 5. So you've wasted the value of the rookie scale contract. So it is kind of a hilarious situation that's happening over across the board.
Go, Pack, go!
I get it.
So
I get
sad.
it. Oh, you guys have championships. The Vikings don't. We know everything you have to say about us. Just like Eminem at the end of 8 Mile. We get it. Congrats on your championship. Congrats on winning titles in the 60s. Nice job.
It's been 30 years too. Okay, it's been unbelievable. You've had 2 QBs. I just love this thought of, well, it's time for him to be gone, so the next Hall of Fame quarterback can come in.
Yeah.
Eventually, that well runs dry.
Yeah, it would be very nice if for 10 years they could hop around with about 6 different franchise quarterbacks like the other teams in their own division. So anyways, yeah, the Packers turned out to be frauds. Judd?
All right, my next statement is this, and I never thought I would say it, but Garrett, please come back. So in a playoff game in which you are going to have, right now it looks like, and this could change, 40% of your starting offensive line gone, your center and your right tackle. Now, Brian O'Neill is a very good player, and his loss is huge. Oli Udoh, though, doesn't run the offensive line. So, like, he's not the guy in charge of signal calling. He's not the guy in charge of snapping the football. Chris Reed right now is. And I understand that, I'm guessing Chris Reed's PFF grades against the Bears were fine. But it's the Bears. And the Bears were mentally golfing. And perhaps they weren't fine. Perhaps they sucked. I have no idea. But the point is, because I will guess the PFF grades tomorrow. But the point is this. Garrett Bradbury's missed 5 games, okay? Garrett Bradbury, I never thought I would say this, but with the way that he played and his familiarity with how Kirk Cousins and that line works against a team that's going to blitz you a ton, and the Giants will blitz a ton, becomes a huge part of that game. He has missed 5 games. Hopefully by now he's progressed to being able to play, but it's a lower back, which makes it dicey. All that being said, I think if Chris Reed has to start a playoff game against a team that's going to blitz you, and Kirk Cousins in particular, it's going to cause problems. I like your chances a lot more with a center who is familiar with the mechanics of how things work. The pressure on Sunday is going to be far more immense, and it worries me that if you take away a key component from Kirk, that's also going to have an impact on Kirk that we don't want to see.
You know what's funny? Outside of the the snap count issues against Green Bay, I actually think from a passing game perspective, the Vikings have been just fine with Chris Reed. It's the run game where it feels like they've missed Bradbury the most, because Bradbury's a very good run blocker, and he's become a much more passable pass protector. So I think just how many times have you seen them try to run up the middle or anywhere within, between the guards, I guess, would be up the middle. But I think Garrett, that's where they've missed Garrett Bradbury even more. But yeah, the Giants are one of the most blitz-heavy teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to get the snap count right finally, and this is great. We're playing center in the NFL. All right, 2 games under our belt. And now you have a team that's looking to take it to the next level, advance on you through the playoffs. The communication between you and the other guards, could some things get lost in there?
They're going to run stunts. They're going to run a ton of stunts. I can feel it in my bones.
But it hasn't been as big of a train wreck in terms of actual blocking with Chris Reed. He's only allowed 2 pressures in the 2 games. And if they've gotten rid of the snap count issues, I don't fear the situation as much. But yes, they would be better with Garrett Bradbury.
What was Schlottman's PFF grade against the Giants in the game they played here a few weeks ago? Do you have that?
Well, let me find it for you.
Do you have that?
You just want the one game?
I want how the center did in in that game, because the Giants do a lot of things that I think are fairly complex at times with Wink Martindale.
So, well, here you go. Schlottmann was a train wreck in pass protection in that game.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
A 26.3 grade out of 100. He allowed 6 pressures, 4 hurries, a sack, and a hit. Yeah.
The Bears game, in my opinion, does not count. Like, it's good they got right. It's good that they won, but I was watching a team that was golfing mentally.
Yeah. You could also make a case that just in their careers as guards and or centers that Chris Reed is far better than Austin Schlottmann, just as an overall player.
Okay.
But I don't disagree getting Garrett Bradbury back. Now, what if Bradbury's only like 70%? Would you rather have him, or would you probably start with him and see, right?
I would think I'd rather have him, because I think the mechanics of that position are so important.
Mm-hmm. I would actually consider at this point, I know it's so late in the game to do this, but if you can get Bradbury at 75%, I trust Chris Reed at right guard more than I trust Ed Ingram right now. Now that Chris Reed's been playing, I would consider making that move. They're not going to.
I know, but I do like the hot takeness of it. Switch at right guard right now. It's awesome.
Let's make it happen.
God, I love this show.
All right, Dex.
All right, my next statement is I'm ready for playoff football. Playoff football from my own team that I watch every day, okay? For the last few years, I've had to watch the Vikings not play playoff football. Pre-COVID was the last time the Vikings made the playoffs. So the last 2 full NFL seasons, 2020, 2021, we have not seen the Vikings in the playoffs. You got these sad Packer fans that are now looking forward to the draft. And this is the first time in 3 years the Vikings haven't been already starting off-season mode already. So the Vikings start playoff football this weekend against the New York Giants. They get the second game on Sunday. It is super wild card weekend. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, playoff football. You know, I actually used to loathe the month of January. Like, personally, I just always think it takes forever. It's such a drag. But I will say, from a football perspective, you get super wild card weekend. You get the divisional round, which is, in my opinion, the best weekend of football. Conference championship, Super Bowl after a week break. I now kind of have changed my tune on January because I love me some playoff football, and I love that the Vikings are in it.
The NFL is the single cure for seasonal depression. I love that they are moving now into middle of February and then free. This is the best part. So the NFL has now taken over. In fact, let me back up a step. I follow a bunch of these old school football accounts on social media that just show like old timey football clips. And one of them showed highlights of the 1957 NFL championship, I want to say.
Giants and Colts?
Colts and Giants, yeah.
Game
Frank Gifford and one of the biggest
most famous games ever.
And that game took place, I believe, on December 27th of 1957. So the league championship ended on December 27th.
Yep.
And since then, over the last, 65, 7 years, the NFL has matriculated its way into early January, mid, late, and now into early February, and then mid-February. And then like 3 or 4 weeks after the Super Bowl, free agency frenzy bonanza begins. And so for decades and decades
before that,
and the combine, right? So for decades, people like Declan and myself and I don't know, Judd, it does get a little sad. January and the holidays are over and football's basically over. In February, it's cold in Minnesota. But now you've got, not only do you have football, you've got super wild card weekend. You've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Royal
and
Rumble.
The divisional round weekend, the Royal Rumble.
Rumble's this in January?
The WWE and the NFL are curing us of our seasonal depression.
Judd,
our winter blues.
Not the wrestling for me.
You got an early Royal Rumble pick for this year?
Dude, Cody's probably coming back.
Ryan Reeves. Yeah. Ryan Reeves is going to show up and he can kick ass.
Yes. Okay, where are we? Are we back?
I've lost complete track.
I think
we're
it's
back to me. Back to me. All right. Yeah. Dan Campbell might be a genius.
Oh, I got one.
Okay, so there's a couple sequences in that game last night. Oh my gosh. He well, first of all, he got those guys to just play out of their minds for the last like 2.5 months. They lost like 2 games or whatever, 1 or 2 games in the last 2 months of the season. So there was a sequence, might have been late third, early fourth, and it was a 3rd and 7 in Packers, like around midfield, but like Packers territory. 3rd and 7, and they run the ball. Now, some of this is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, with Dan Campbell's blessing, but they run the ball on 3rd and 7. I'm like, God, that's awfully conservative just to get to the edge of field goal range to kick like a 50-some yard field goal in the Lambeau weather. but then they go for it instead. So set the 3rd and 7 run, which catches the Packers off guard, and then the green light to go for it. Love the aggressiveness. But then later on, if you guys remember, as they're trying to run the clock out with like 2.5 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, the Packers jumped off sides, potentially on purpose, on 2nd and 1.
Yes.
And they had like one timeout left at the time.
Yes.
And Dan Campbell declined the penalty. And it might have seemed like, well, that's kind of weird. Why wouldn't you just take the first down? The Packers were trying to get back to first down so that they could stop you on 3 plays, get the ball back quicker. That's why you jump off sides on purpose. But declining it, running a play, get a first down, it builds an extra play and 40 seconds off the clock into the equation as you're trying to run this thing out.
Yes.
And then green lighting the hook and ladder play again. Great offensive mastermind, coordinator Ben Johnson, but ultimately Dan Campbell's the one green lighting this stuff, making the 4th down decisions. He's been made fun of by us and everyone else as this meathead football buffoon, right? But he has turned out to be a really savvy coach. Maybe the Vikings missed out. I'm just saying. Maybe the Vikings should have fired Mike Zimmer a year earlier.
I'd be
Love
so
me some
curious.
KOC about it.
I'd be so curious what they would have done if the Seahawks had lost, and that's a playoff spot, though. Like, do you do all of
Would
that?
they have done the aggressive stuff?
Yeah. Now the declining the penalty, I think that they do, because they essentially forced the Packers then to call a timeout that the Packers were trying to preserve. So that was just genius.
Yeah.
But that last play when I think it was Mont St. Brown pitched it backwards, I'm like, oh my God, this is backyard stuff. Like,
It's
this
amazing.
is school. This is recessed football, baby.
But that's kind of like part of their identity with the fake punts and everything they do is
You're
like
right.
they're kind of this crazy team.
They're
Just like Dan Campbell, they could just do anything at any time. They could just like break a bottle over their heads at a
They
party,
play drunk football.
bleed out, you know.
They play drunk football. They're like, there goes Uncle Art again.
The
He's
functioning
dancing
alcoholic
with
football
a
team.
lampshade on his head.
Let's do one more here from Judd because we got a bunch of other stuff to get to today, which you'll find on the Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily feeds. Last statement presented by our friends at Underdog, Declan. Underdog Fantasy.
That's right. It was a little PGA, little Century tournament action over the weekend, and old Dex Tweets had a nice little sweat on Friday, but he wrote a couple unders here. JT, there's new options, by the way, now for scores. You can take birdies over or under, and I took the under of JT birdies, which was a sweat. He had 5 with 3 holes to play, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to come right down to it, but never a doubt. Because Underdog Fantasy is the best way to get a sweat on any type of game, whether it's PGA picks, NFL picks. You got playoff football coming up. You can do drafts. You can do playoff pick'ems. There's so many different options at Underdog Fantasy. And if you haven't joined, use promo code SCORE, SKOR. They'll match your first deposit up to $100. Go download the Underdog Fantasy app.
All right, give me one more statement.
All right. Staying on the theme in the NFC North of genius teams, Ryan Poles is a genius. The Bears tank is one of the greatest tanks I've ever seen.
Signing Nathan Peterman.
They won too many games to start. He starts trading away guys who are contributors. But more importantly, think about the tank in full, okay? Now, one is when people say, well, teams don't tank, coaches don't tank. No, you're exactly right. You make your team so bad that, one, they're going to lose, and two, they're eventually going to have their will to try taken away. What you want to do is get a collection that's so bad that they're like, we're screwed. But in the midst of doing that, they actually, in the midst of a terrible year in which they're going to get the first overall pick, they got an answer or got very close to one on their potential quarterback, Justin Fields. Justin Fields, we didn't know.
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out
Well,
how
we are.
loyal they are to Justin Fields.
We're gonna F around and
But-
find out.
We're
they-
gonna find out.
But they know a lot more on him, and that's the point. The point is they actually got a very good idea of what he can and can't do. I think that this tank is among the best I've seen, because when you walk away with the first pick, with at least knowing who your quarterback is and so much salary cap space, it's outrageous. I think the Chicago Bears in the next 3 years are set up to come, no pun intended, roaring back.
It's I mean, they have
I love what
twice
they
as
did.
much cap space as basically the second ranked team. They have over $100 million to spend on free agents.
Yeah.
And so, but the number one pick is likely to be a quarterback if someone else was drafting, right? So what do? Do you
Or would they
do
trade
you draft a maybe better quarterback and trade Justin Fields? Do you trade the number 1 pick for a
Right.
haul?
Exactly.
They're very much in the driver's seat for the draft, for free agency, and it'll be interesting how good, because look what happened with the Jaguars. You can turn it around real quick if you got the right coach, the right quarterback, and a bunch of free agent money. So we'll see.
Hey, the Cardinals fired Cliff Kingsbury here this morning too as well. So there's vacancies are starting.
I love this. I love
Black Monday
Black
is
Monday.
in full effect. Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury, Lovie Smith was fired last night. I think those are the only two from like after the season so far, right?
Denver's looking. Carolina is.
Yeah. Okay.
I still wonder about the Chargers. If the Chargers lose their first playoff game,
I think Staley's bought himself another year.
I just think Sean Payton. Sean Payton is a very smart, well-connected, savvy, perhaps even underhanded guy. And all I'm saying is that Justin Herbert, okay? So like you could talk about, well, Denver, I gotta go coach Russ then, and he might be cooked. If I got the keys to the Justin Herbert car and I talk to the Chargers and I'm Peyton and I say, look at what I did with Drew Brees, right? And look, Staley's a great guy. God bless him. He is a great man.
Brandon, you're a great guy.
But he's a defensive guy. I'm just saying, look at Joe Burrow. Look at Joe Burrow and look at Herbert. And Herbert is damn good. Is he being maximized there?
No, he's not.
Wouldn't you want to
doesn't
maximize
Sean
him?
Payton? Does Sean Payton? He does Fox stuff in L.A. all the time.
Yeah, he's
right?
a big time California guy. Look at him. I bet he loves California.
You could stay in L.A.
Just
twist that knife in Brandon Staley's back. That's a good lesson for the kids out there.
Oh, Sean Payton oversaw a bounty scheme. You think he's going to care about Brandon Staley?
I love that he went on national TV yesterday and he just like was completely transparent about, and he's doing it for leverage, right? Yes, and I've got these discussions happening with owners. Had a great discussion with this owner yesterday, and then they asked him, I think, what on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the likelihood you're back at Fox? He said probably like a 7. Leverage.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely having these conversations, but I'll probably go back to Fox unless you want to give me $10 million a year.
Unless I got the Chargers job. I think he's going to pick though, because I think he's the type of guy that probably doesn't want like a quarterback who he doesn't trust.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he said ownership and front office are the most important things over quarterback. Well, but if you can get all of it, I think you'd probably
bring it on.
Probably set up. So, all right, Mackey and Judd, it's playoff week, so we've got you guys covered on Purple Daily and Mackey and Judd. Be on the lookout, too, for Dex and Realistic Randy on Purple Daily. Before we die with Jesse and Thor, Alex Boone is going to have some Giants-related scouting, I think, later this week on Trenches on Purple Daily. First time in 3 years we get to experience playoff week. Vikings and Giants, vent line to follow on Sunday. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Mackey and Judd.